Today, we're jumping into a topic that, well, it really touches every single one of us at some point. The huge challenge, but also the absolute necessity of change. Our sources for this deep dive, they center around this powerful, almost, disruptive idea, turning the world upside down. So our mission today is to explore why change is just so incredibly hard to accept, let alone enact, what really drives it, and why, despite all that pushback, it's not just important, it's completely essential. We'll be drawing on quite a mix of history, religion, sociology, looking at how individuals, movements, they all strive to transform things, communities, the world. So yeah, get ready to maybe reconsider a few things.
It's definitely an essential conversation. And what our sources highlight right from the start is this core paradox. The path to peace, it's almost never simple. It's often really complex, sometimes deeply divisive, actually. We're going to see how this deep human resistance to change affects everything. Personal lives, family stuff, huge social movements, global shifts. It's universal. And understanding it is key.
Okay, so let's start there with that really compelling idea from the sources. This notion that Jesus and his followers turned the world upside down. And this wasn't like a gentle suggestion, right? It was a call for a radical shift in how people saw things, how they acted. Our sources tell us the leaders, the people back then, they were, comfortable with the traditions, the interpretations they knew, and they fiercely opposed this new message.
Just like they had with earlier prophets, the text says.
Exactly. It wasn't just some theological debate in the clouds. It was a massive social, cultural upheaval.
You've really hit on something key there. That resistance, it wasn't just about, abstract ideas. It came from a very human place. The source says, change wasn't received well by people comfortable with their way of thinking about God and acceptable behavior. And think about it. We all build these comfort zones, right? Not just physically, but intellectually, socially, even spiritually. These patterns, they make the world feel predictable. So any challenge to that, doesn't matter how well-meaning, it often just triggers this deep opposition. It's almost like a defense mechanism against the unknown.
And this isn't just, ancient history locked away in a book. The source material then brings it forward very vividly with personal reflections from the 1960s, a time described as when the country roiled, with all sorts of movements. The author remembers, for instance, the Watts riots, the big demonstrations against discrimination faced by Black people, and the reaction.
Resistance.
Yeah, widespread resistance. State, local governments in so many places actively fighting against integration, fighting the very idea of equality. It was a fierce battle for basic rights.
Played out right on the streets, in the courts.
And that era, it saw other big shifts too. Huge opposition to the Vietnam War. It tore through college campuses. It led to unbelievable things, like the National Guard firing on students in Ohio. The lesson drawn, according to the source, from both the racial conflicts and the anti-war stuff, was stark. For many in power, it was like government decisions weren't to be opposed.
A very clear picture of power not wanting to bend.
Right, often with terrible human cost.
And then there was the women's movement starting up, facing incredible resistance from men wanting to keep traditional roles, even when their wives increasingly had to work just to make ends meet. And the source points out, kind of astonishingly, that some of those attitudes still around today.
Things haven't changed much today, it notes, yeah?
And beyond these big societal things, the sources show how resistance played out personally too, like the slow acceptance of divorce, which for many was a way out of awful situations. At the same time, gay individuals were starting to gain some rights in certain places. But the author talks about these really hostile attitudes. The roll queers reference.
Yeah, people thinking it was fun to go out and roll clears. But the author knew, having worked with many gay people, they were as good as anyone else.
Such a powerful contrast. Prejudice versus just recognizing basic humanity.
It really is.
So you put all these examples together, these historical moments, and the lesson is just crystal clear. People liked the way things were and opposed change. Simple as that, almost. And what's really striking is, like the source says, we still hear echoes of that resistance to these social changes today.
It's not just stories.
No, not just anecdotes. The sources point to broader sociological findings, too. Studies from all over the world show people, universally, hate change. It often comes from this basic human thing of valuing what feels stable, what feels safe. Change, even good change, means leaving something familiar behind. Habits, structures, maybe even part of your identity. And that feels like a loss or a threat.
Makes sense.
And add this context. Since 1900, the source notes, the pace of change has accelerated at an exponential rate, which just ramps up the resistance. But there's a hopeful bit too. It says, Once change has taken place, it is slowly adopted by the majority.
Even after a big fight.
Yeah, even after strong, sometimes violent resistance. The initial battle seems to be the hardest part, but history shows acceptance does grow eventually.
Okay, so that historical backdrop brings us to this really interesting paradox the sources get into, the sword of peace, you could call it. The material looks at some powerful biblical verses that, well, when you put them together, they paint a really complex picture of peace. On one side, you have Luke 2.14, talking about the intent for peace. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace among men with whom he is pleased. Harmony, right? But then right up against that, Matthew 10.3436 says something surprising. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father.
A sword, that's jarring.
It is. And then finally, Galatians 3.2729 talks about this ultimate unity. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free man. There's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
So how do we square these? Peace, but also a sword. Unity, but division.
That's exactly the complexity of the issue our sources want us to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Well, fundamentally, the idea is we're all the same in God's eyes, created in God's own image, and the end goal is peace and unity. Jesus' message, despite that intent, would divide people even in their own families. The point being, true peace isn't just like the absence of fighting on the surface.
Okay.
It often means you have to dismantle the old stuff, unjust structures, outdated ways of thinking. And that process, challenging the status quo, calling for deeper, more fair understanding of God's will, it inherently causes friction. It causes division before a more genuine peace can actually take root.
So the old ways have to give way.
Exactly. The source concludes, the old ways have to give way to new ones that are more representative of God's will. It's about progress, evolving towards something more just, more loving, even if that evolution feels like a fight.
That historical view, understanding change is disruptive, it's really valuable. But how does this stuff, this resistance, this push for progress, show up now? Today, our sources bring it right into the present, highlighting how these patterns are still playing out. For instance, they cite a forward-looking August 2025 Gallup poll. It found 64% of Americans say racism against Black people is widespread.
Wow, 64%.
Yeah, and among Black adults, it's 83%. That's a huge indicator of a widely felt, persistent problem society's still dealing with.
And that's where the complexity really sharpens. Another survey, May 2025 Pew Research, also in our sources, it found 43% of Americans feel the country has not gone far enough on racial equality. But then, 18% of all adults believe we have gone too far.
Gone too far? That's a big gap.
A huge, almost irreconcilable divide in how people see things, isn't it? And it's even starker when you break it down. 82% of Black Americans feel we haven't gone far enough. 71% of Democrats feel that way. The source also mentions briefly the mutual distrust between people of color and police, how it's often inflamed by the press and activists, just showing how many layers there are. Deeply held experiences, beliefs, it all feeds into these ongoing challenges.
Right. So with all this resistance, this division still clearly present, the sources make us ask, what actually moves things forward? What are the levers, the real drivers of change?
The things that push against that inertia.
Exactly. They point mainly to two things, technology and social pressure. And interestingly, foundational documents like the U.S. Constitution, they're described as a pillar of rights that is a constant thorn in the side of those who don't want change.
Like the documents themselves have a built-in push for progress.
Kind of, like they carry the seeds for their own evolution, always challenging us to live up to those founding ideals.
Yes, and what's really crucial there is that these ideals, they aren't meant to be static. They're living documents. Their very intent calls for ongoing reevaluation for progress. It shows how deeply embedded these foundational ideas are meant to be. I mean, think about these key phrases from the Declaration Preamble. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Powerful stuff.
Absolutely.
And then the Constitution Preamble. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. These phrases, the source explains, establish the document's intent. They heavily influence how laws are interpreted.
But there's a concern there too, right?
Yes, the author expresses concern that more recent Supreme Court rulings have relied more on judicial interpretation, maybe moving away from what the author sees as that original focus on social justice. And there's a pretty stark warning tied to that. our great experiment with democracy is in peril unless younger generations act to put us back on the course of social justice.
Wow. So this mix of structures, history, resistance, it brings us to a really key psychological insight from the sources, maybe even counterintuitive, about how we actually operate when faced with change. The author's work suggests that few people are logical. That's quite a statement.
It is.
Instead, the sources argue we mostly react based on our attitudes. And these attitudes, they're shaped by experiences, especially those driven by emotion, and have little to do with our beliefs.
Beliefs versus attitudes, that's a powerful distinction.
It really is. Suggesting our rational side often takes a backseat to our emotional history when we decide whether to accept or reject change.
And this point is so compelling because it means, our usual tactic. Presenting facts, logic, trying to convince someone. It often just misses the mark completely. The source is blunt. You can't force attitude change.
Can't force it.
Nope. It makes the point that even Jesus, with his incredible message, his miracles, he couldn't force people to change theirs. Even today, with focus groups, they might show what people do, but the source says they rarely modify attitudes because attitudes are just so much deeper.
So trying to win with data.
Yeah, think about a time you tried to convince someone with perfect facts and they just wouldn't budge. That's this in action. Their attitudes, those deep, emotionally charged experiences, they act like a filter, making objective facts way less impactful than we think. It's not about logic, it's about something more fundamental, more emotional.
So, okay, if individual attitudes are that stubborn, that hard to shift, where does that leave us? Seems a bit bleak.
Well, there is good news. The source points out that just like a huge portion of the world resonates with Jesus' message, there's also a huge portion of the world resonates with the need for many changes.
So even if changing one person is hard, there's a collective sense that things need to improve.
Exactly. While personal change is tough, there's often this shared yearning for progress. A collective understanding that, yeah, lots of things in our world need to evolve.
Right. So let's bring it together then. The central message from this deep dive seems to be change is essential. Absolutely essential. It's essential if we want to achieve what the Constitution talks about. A more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty.
For ourselves and our posterity.
Exactly. And for those connecting with the religious side, it's essential for that abundant life Jesus promised us through improved relationships with others. Ultimately, it's about building a better world. One relationship, one community at a time, always striving for more justice, more peace.
And that raises such an important point about peace itself. It's not passive. The sources conclude with this really profound insight that peace isn't just something you achieve and then relax. It's a struggle that causes pain.
A struggle causing pain.
Yeah, but it's worth the pain and struggle. Think about it in the context of, say, the current state of people of color in the U.S. compared to the days of slavery. That change involved immense, agonizing struggle. But it shows how profound change, born from that persistent effort, can lead to a more just, more peaceful reality. True peace often comes out of that fire, that willingness to endure the discomfort.
That's a powerful way to frame it. And for those listening, maybe feeling called to be part of that change, the sources offer some pretty clear advice on what it takes. People who make change happen, they have to be shrewd, push hard, and especially have to understand how to make change.
It's not just about good intentions.
No, not enough to just have the right idea or a logical argument. There's even this quote from Matthew 10:16 that captures the balance needed. You have to be cunning as serpents and yet as innocent as doves.
Strategy and purity of purpose.
Yeah, combining smart thinking, understanding people, pushing relentlessly, but always with that ethical core, that innocence of motive.
Absolutely. And maybe as you reflect on all this, here's a final thought from our source material to really chew on after we finish. Our answer is God. God's answer is us. Together we make the world better.
Wow.
Or, maybe even more direct, this call to action. With hate, we have more to lose than gain. Break the cycle. Really profound ideas reminding us, that the responsibility for making change happen, for pushing towards that better world, it really lies with all of us. And the path, yeah, it's hard, but it's always worth taking.